Luca Mancini never expected to walk into a laundromat on a Wednesday afternoon and leave owing his life to a woman he had come specifically to destroy. He had sent 2 men ahead of him. They came back with a broken wrist. Between them and a story nobody in his organization wanted to believe, he decided to handle it himself. The suds and spin on the corner of Delancey and 9th was the kind of place that existed in the margins of the city. Flickering fluorescent lights, a handwritten price list taped to the wall with yellowing Scotch tape, 3 machines perpetually out of order. It served the people nobody thought about, the overnight nurses, the busboys, the women dragging kids on their hips while trying to fold fitted sheets with one hand. It had been operating in his territory for 11 years without trouble, run by the same family the whole time, until the original owner had a stroke and left everything to his daughter. That daughter was Wren Callahan. Luca stepped through the glass door at 4:47 in the afternoon, flanked by Felix and Cord, and found her standing at the long folding table in the back, sorting through a pile of somebody's work uniforms with the unhurried focus of a woman who had nowhere more important to be. She was 26, wide across the shoulders and the hips, the kind of heavy that came from a lifetime of standing on concrete floors and lifting commercial dryers that weighed more than most men she'd met. Her hair was pulled back in a knot that had stopped being neat around noon. Her uniform shirt was pale blue, her name stitched over the breast pocket in white thread. She didn't look up. "We're closing in 10 minutes, she said. "If you got a load in a machine, you got time. If you don't, come back tomorrow." Luca walked to the counter. He was 51 years old, built like a man who had been trim once, and let it settle into something more permanent and more dangerous, silver at his temples, and dressed in a dark jacket that cost more than Wren's monthly rent. He put his hands flat on the laminate counter and looked at her. "I'm not here for laundry, I can see that." She set down a folded shirt, finally looked at him. Her eyes were dark brown, unimpressed. "You're Mancini." He wasn't surprised she knew his name. Everybody in a 6-block radius knew his name. "Then you know why I'm here. Eddie came in last Tuesday," she said, her voice completely even. "He put a cigarette out on my dryer panel and told me the new rate was $300 a month. I told him the rate was 0 because I don't pay protection, and he grabbed my wrist." She paused, picked up another shirt. "I put his arm through the wringer." Behind Luca, Cord made a sound. "He's got a fractured radius," Luca said. "He should have let go when I told him to." She began folding again, smooth and efficient, matching sleeves to sleeves. "The machine's fine, if that's what you're wondering." Heavy-duty Milner. Barely noticed. Luca studied her. He had spent 3 decades reading people the way other men read newspapers, scanning for weakness, for the tells that told him exactly how hard he needed to press. He was looking for the tremor in her hands, the too steady voice of someone overcompensating, the slight widening of the eyes that meant the bravado was a thin coat of paint over something soft underneath. He found none of it. "You put my man in a cast," Luca said, stepping around the end of the counter. Felix and Cord moved toward the door without being told, turning the deadbolt, flipping the sign to closed. "You know what happens to people who put my men in casts, Wren. I know what you want me to think happens." She moved to the next pile, unhurried. "But you came yourself, which means you're curious, not angry. Angry men send more men." That stopped him for half a second. He recovered smoothly, moving deeper into her workspace, past the industrial pressing machine and the rack of hanger garments in clear plastic. He was invading her territory deliberately. It was a technique. People in their own space became protective of it. Flustered, exposed. He had seen hard men crumble the moment someone walked behind their desk. Wren stepped back, set down the shirt, and picked up the short wooden handle she used to manage the drum of the commercial wringer. It was solid maple, worn smooth from years of use, with the weight and heft of a weapon, even though it had never been intended as one. "You're in my workspace," she said. "I own the building your workspace sits in," Luca replied. He moved closer. He was a tall man. He used it. I own the lease, the landlord, the building inspector who signs off on your equipment every January, and the licensing office that gave you the business permit you've got framed on that wall. You are operating in my city, in my neighborhood, on my goodwill. And right now, my goodwill is running thin. Wren looked at him for a long moment. You want to know why? Eddie came back, without a story that made sense, she asked. I'm listening. Because he grabbed me. Her voice dropped one register, not louder, just heavier. I have worked this floor since I was 15 years old. I watched my father run this place for 22 years, smiling at people who looked through him, paying off people who looked down at him. He had a stroke at 63 from the stress of it. And when he handed me the keys from his hospital bed, the last thing he said to me was, "Don't let them take it." She lifted the wringer handle slightly, not threatening, just there. I don't let people take things, Mr. Mancini. Anything. Luca felt something shift in his chest. He ignored it. That's a moving story, he said. He stepped into her space completely now, less than 2 feet between them, using every inch of the height differential that made civilians instinctively look up at him, made them feel small before he'd said anything worth fearing. But stories don't keep the lights on, and sentiment doesn't stop what happens to businesses that refuse to cooperate with my organization. I've come here personally, which is a courtesy I extend to almost no one. I'm offering you the opportunity to understand the situation before it becomes. He reached out. He meant to grip her by the chin. It was something he had done before to men twice her size, and the effect was always the same: immediate, visceral submission, the physical reality of helplessness crashing through whatever wall they'd built. His hand didn't get there. Wren dropped her weight forward, and to the left, the wringer handle coming up not as a strike but as a lever, jamming hard into the inside of his elbow joint and folding his arm back against itself. It wasn't elegant, it was mechanical and practiced, the movement of someone who had learned it by doing it, not by watching it. She stepped into the space his stumble created, shoved her forearm across his chest with all 263 pounds behind it, and put him back first against the flat face of the industrial pressing machine. The machine was cold and steel and solid. Luca was not a man who made sounds when he was surprised. He had trained that out of himself at a very young age. But the breath went out of him in one sharp exhale, and he felt the burn of the steam iron's edge against his shoulder blade through the jacket. Wren had the wringer handle across his throat, not crushing, measuring. "Felix," she said, without raising her voice or turning her head, "your gun is in your jacket. If you pull it, I'm going to push this handle, and the steam press is going to close on your boss's spine at 350 degrees. She glanced sideways at Cord. Same goes. From where he was pinned, Luca could see Felix go still, could see the calculation running across his face, the frantic math of violence. Felix was good at his job. Felix was also not stupid. He looked at the machine, looked at Wren's arm, looked at the specific angle of the handle against Luca's throat. Felix took his hand out of his jacket and put both palms up. "Good," Wren said. Luca, to his own amazement, almost smiled. He stopped himself. He was pressed against a commercial steam press in a laundromat on Delancey Street by a woman who weighed 1/4 ton and wore a shirt with her name sewn on it, and some piece of him that was separate from his ego found it the most interesting thing that had happened in years. "You know," he said, his voice still controlled, though somewhat compressed, "this isn't the direction I expected this conversation to go." "Most people don't expect me," she said. "That's usually their first mistake." What was my first mistake? Sending Eddie. The pressure eased back a fraction. Just a fraction. "If you'd walked in here yourself first, like a person, I might have talked to you. I'm not unreasonable. But you sent a man who burned my equipment and put his hands on me, and now I've got a damaged panel and a month's worth of ruined customer loads I had to eat the cost on. That doesn't go away because you're wearing a nice jacket. Luca looked at her. Really looked, the way he hadn't permitted himself to when he'd walked in, when she'd been a variable, an obstacle, an entry on a problem ledger. She was breathing hard, the exertion showing in the flush climbing her thick neck, the slight tremor of effort in her forearm. But her eyes were level and her jaw was set, and there was nothing in her face that looked like fear. There was something that looked considerably more complicated than fear. The panel, he said, $1,200 to replace. Eddie's organization should cover it. And the customer loads? $840. I've got receipts. He was quiet for a moment. The fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere in the back, a dryer tumbled through its final cycle with a low, rhythmic thud. Let me up, he said. She held for 2 more seconds. Then she stepped back, lowering the handle, and moved to a position 3 feet away where she could still reach the press handle if she needed to. She picked up a clean towel from the folding table and pressed it briefly to the corner of her mouth, which had caught the edge of a shelf bracket when he'd startled, and she'd moved fast. A thin line of blood. Luca straightened his jacket. He rubbed the inside of his elbow where the handle had found the nerve. He looked at the blood on the towel and felt something he hadn't expected to feel, which was the specific sour quality of guilt. "Felix," he said. "Wait outside, boss, outside." They went. The door clicked shut. The deadbolt was still thrown. It was just the 2 of them now in the late afternoon quiet. Dust motes drifting through the fluorescent light, the smell of detergent and warm cotton, and, faintly her, something plain and clean, like bar soap, underneath the day's work. Luca pulled up the small wooden chair that sat beside the change machine. He sat down. The chair was cheap and too small for him, and he did not care. "Tell me your terms," he said. Wren looked at him for a long moment, the towel still in her hand. "I don't pay protection fees," she said. "Not now, not after this, not ever. The Suds and Spin has been here since before your organization moved into this neighborhood, and it will be here after. That's term 1. And term 2. The Vietnamese nail salon 4 doors down, the halal cart on 9th that parks in front of the building, the woman who runs the alteration shop on the 2nd floor of this building, Helena Marsh, none of them get touched. No raises, no visits, nothing. They're good people, and they've been here longer than your people." She set the towel down. "And term 3. You make sure that whoever Eddie answers to understands that the next time a man puts hands on a woman in her own place of business, because she won't write a check to a man who didn't earn it, that man deals with me personally. Not you. Me." Luca leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. He looked at the floor, the old cracked linoleum with its pattern worn invisible, and then looked up at her. "You're asking me to extend territorial protection without payment," he said, "to 4 separate businesses, while publicly acknowledging that one of my men was removed from your premises by a laundromat attendant." "Laundromat owner," Wren said. "And yes, you understand that in my world, that's the kind of arrangement that makes other people think they can do the same thing. Then tell them to try." She crossed her arms. They were substantial arms, forearms roppy, with muscle from years of hauling wet linen and shifting industrial equipment. "Or tell them that you made the arrangement because you looked at this situation and decided it was good business. You own the building, you want tenants who stay, who pay their rent, who keep the street from going sideways. I do all of that. I have for 11 years. She tilted her head. "You came in here with a script. I've seen the script. It ends with me writing a check or the shop burning down, and either way your men have a story to tell. But you're still sitting in that chair, Mr. Mancini. Which means the script isn't running." Luca was quiet for what felt like a long time. Outside, a garbage truck ground past. The dryer in the back clicked off, he said. "You mentioned your father." Something moved in her face. Just briefly. "Yes! Patrick Callahan." Her eyes sharpened. "You know my father's name. I know more than his name." Luca's voice shifted, lost some of its deliberate steel, and became something more complicated. Patrick Callahan ran this laundromat for 22 years and never, in all that time, paid a protection fee to any organization operating in this city. Not mine, not the Byrne family before mine, not anyone. He paused. We left him alone. I know, Wren said, but something in her voice had gone careful. He said he had an understanding. He did. Luca looked at his hands. My father had an arrangement with yours. 15 years ago, when I was still learning what the word arrangement meant, Patrick Callahan found 3 of our people in a very bad situation in the back of a shipping container on the Delancey docks. He could have walked away. He could have called the police anonymously and waited until someone came to handle it. He looked up. 2 of those 3 people are still alive. One of them is Felix. The silence stretched. He never told me that, Wren said finally. He wasn't supposed to. Luca stood slowly, straightening to his full height. The agreement was that the shop and everyone in it would be left in peace. For as long as there was a Callahan behind that counter, my father gave his word. He paused. My father died 4 years ago. I inherited his debts and his obligations both, and somewhere in the transition, Eddie didn't get the full picture. Wren stared at him. You came down here personally, she said slowly, because when your men came back empty-handed and told you who owned this place, you recognized the name. I came down here personally, Luca said, because I needed to know whether you were the kind of person your father raised you to be, or whether the name was coincidence. He looked around the shop, the handwritten signs, the out-of-order tags, the framed business license on the wall, and the photograph next to it of a man with his arm around a girl of about 10, both of them grinning in front of a spinning drums. Wren pulled in a long breath. Let it out. Eddie's wrist, she said. I can cover half the medical. You'll cover none of it. He put his cigarette out on your machine. Luca's voice had no room in it for argument on that point. I'll see to Eddie, and I'll see to them steadily. And the others? Helena, the cart, the nail salon? They're on the list. He smoothed his jacket unnecessarily. It was a habit, a tell, and it annoyed him that she would probably notice it. The same list your shop is on. No collection, no visits. I want it in writing. He looked at her for a beat. Nobody in my organization puts anything in writing. Then I want 3 witnesses from your side who know the terms and know I know who they are. She didn't blink. Insurance. He almost smiled again. This time he let it happen, just a small one, just at the corner. Your father negotiated exactly the same way. He taught me, she said. She didn't smile back, but something in her face eased slightly, like a door opening 1 inch. I'm going to go unlock the door now. Your men are going to wonder. They're used to wondering. She crossed to the door, threw the deadbolt, turned the sign back to open. Then she went back to the folding table, picked up where she'd left off, smooth and automatic, as if the last 30 minutes had been a minor interruption. Luca should have left. He knew he should have left. Instead, he stood near the counter, watching her work, trying to understand the specific and unfamiliar sensation that was making it difficult for him to identify the exit. You live above the shop? He asked. Apartment 2B? Yes. She didn't look up. Why? No reason. He was quiet for a moment. The photograph, on the wall, that's him? That's him. Her hand stilled briefly on the shirt she was folding. He used to say this place was the only honest thing in the neighborhood. Everybody brings dirty laundry eventually. Luca thought about that. I'll have someone bring the check for the panel Monday, he said. Leave it with Helena. She's in before me. He nodded and he turned to go and he got to the door and stopped. Wren. She looked up. The move you used against my arm. Judo principle, she said. Leverage, not strength. My father made me take classes when I was 12. Said a girl who worked with heavy equipment should know how to move weight. He was right. She held his gaze for a moment. It was not a comfortable kind of look. It had too much assessment, too much history she couldn't know yet, Too much of the thing he was not going to name out loud in a laundromat on Delancey Street. "Monday," she said, "with Helena." He walked out. He walked out into the pale early evening, past Felix and Cord, who fell in wordlessly beside him, and he did not speak until they reached the car. He stood there with his hand on the door handle, looking back down the block at the flickering pink sign, "Suds and Spin," all machines working, which was, as far as he could see, not true about at least 3 of the machines. "The building," he said to Felix. "Boss, Delancey and 9th. The lease." He got in the car. "Reduce her rent by 30%. Do it this week. And find out what that panel replacement actually costs and double the number." Felix stared at him through the window. Luca rolled it up. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. 4 days later, on a Sunday night when the shop was dark and locked, Wren was doing her books in the back office. A room barely large enough to contain a second-hand desk, a floor lamp, and the smell of her father's old pipe tobacco that had never fully left the walls. When her phone rang, unknown number, she almost let it go. She picked it up. "There's a conversation happening tonight that concerns your building," Luca Mancini's voice said. "No greeting. A man named Stover. He handles commercial real estate transitions for a group that's moving into the Delancey corridor. He's been buying up leases and the building you're in is on his list." Wren sat, very still. "That's not your building, no. I don't own it. I lease space in it, same as you, through 2 intermediaries." A pause. "Which means I have no legal ability to stop this. I'm calling because you should know. Why are you calling me?" The pause this time was slightly different. Less calculated. "I said I'd look into Eddie's situation. In doing that, I came across this." "That's not an answer," he agreed. "It isn't." She pressed her back against her father's old chair, feeling the familiar give of the worn cushion. "What does this Stover want with the building?" "Mixed-use development. The ground floor tenants get 60-day notices and the building gets converted. It happens fast, and it happens in a way that's technically legal and almost impossible to fight without resources." "I don't have resources, I know." She stared at the wall, at the framed photograph she'd brought from the shop floor. Her father again, younger, standing outside this same building in what had to be the early 90s, squinting into summer sun. "What would you need from me to make this a problem for Stover?" "From you?" "Nothing." His voice was careful. "I have methods available to me that you wouldn't want the details of. I'm not offering to use them. I'm offering to make a phone call, as a person who has certain standing in this neighborhood, to the people Stover answers to, professionally. And what do you want in return?" "I already told you what I wanted." "You wanted my father's arrangement honored. You've got that." "I do." She waited. "Wren." His voice dropped below its usual controlled register into something that had no policy behind it. "I would like to have a conversation with you that doesn't happen in the context of me owing your family something or you owing me something. I don't know how to arrange that. I'm aware that's an unusual problem for me to have." She pulled in a slow breath. "That's an extremely strange thing for you to say to a woman you met at her place of work while actively threatening her. I know you were going to shut my shop down, I was. And now you're calling me on a Sunday night to warn me about a real estate developer." "Yes." Wren looked up at the ceiling, which had a water stain in the shape of nothing in particular, Aunt Dud, she'd been looking at for 6 years. "Call Stover's people," she said. "And then don't do anything else for me for a while. I need to think about whether I'm the kind of person who can separate those 2 things." A long pause. "That's fair. I'll let you know what I decide." She hung up. She sat in the dark of the back office for a long time, listening to the building settle around her. The creak of the old pipes, the distant sound of someone's television upstairs, the groan of the sign bracket in the wind coming off the street. She thought about her father, who had kept a secret for 15 years because a man had asked him to, and he had decided that man was worth keeping a secret for. She thought about what it meant to inherit more than a laundromat. She thought about a man who had come in to break her and had sat down in a cheap chair and asked to hear her terms instead. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday evening with rain coming in off the river and the fluorescent light above the change machine finally dying, for real, the door of the Suds and Spin opened at 6:30. Luca Mancini came in alone, no Felix, no cord, wearing a jacket that was slightly less expensive than the last one, with a paper cup of coffee in each hand. Wren looked up from the machine she was fixing, the panel, now repaired, being recalibrated by hand. He held out one of the cups. She looked at him. She looked at the cup. "Stover," she said, "resolved Helena, the cart, the nail salon, all still in place, all still on the list." She took the cup. They stood there in the humming quiet of the laundromat on Delancey and 9th, the rain beginning to tap against the reinforced glass, the machines cycling through their rhythms like something that had always been true and would go on being true long after either of them had figured out what this was. "There's a chair," Wren said, nodding toward the corner. Luca looked at it. The cheap wooden one, still sitting there from the last time. He pulled it up and sat down in it again. Wren went back to her panel. She did not tell him to leave. He did not offer to go. Outside, the rain came down on Delancey Street, washing over the laundromat sign and the halal cart covered with its tarp for the night, and the light in Helena's window on the second floor, running into the gutters and carrying with it all the small accumulated weight of the day. Inside, the machines turned and the fluorescent light buzzed, and the newest and most unlikely alliance in the Mancini organization's 50-year history sat in comfortable, cautious quiet. The boss of the South Side and the girl who had put her arm through the wringer, deciding, without saying so, that this was only the beginning.